GOP presidential candidate Newt Gingrich is blasting President Obama for that apology that he sent to the Afghan president for the burning of those Qurans by NATO soldiers. Hours after the apology, a person who was wearing an Afghan National Army uniform killed 2 U.S. troops based in Afghanistan. Newt Gingrich says Karzai is the one who owes us, the United States, an apology for the shootings. Is this going to be part of the narrative as we move forward in the Republican primary race and the general election? To talk about it, Republican strategist Matt Mackowiak is with us this morning. Also, Democratic strategist Marjorie Clifton is here, and political reporter from Roll Call, David Drucker. Let me start with you, Matt. The first thing I thought of when I saw what happened was that this could end up being a political football right back here, because any time there's any conciliatory language that goes lobbed overseas, it becomes an issue here. Is this gonna stay within this week, or is this gonna play out right through till November?
My sense is this is a one-week thing. This plays into the theme that Newt Gingrich has been putting forward throughout this campaign, that Obama goes around the world apologizing for America. This is a situation where tensions were high. You had an unfortunate incident that America's apologized for with the Quran burning. You also had these 2 American soldiers die right back to back. Look, this is the kind of thing that Newt Gingrich is going to put forward if he is the nominee. I think that's an unlikely scenario. But this is the kind of thing that you do if you're talking to the base. It's not the kind of thing that you do if you're talking to independent voters. And once we have a nominee on the Republican side, you're going to have to switch your focus from talking to the base to talking to the middle.
You know what? I don't know. Marjorie Clifton, weigh in on this, because there's a lot of shift in feelings towards what's been going on overseas, particularly in Afghanistan and post-Iraq. I'm wondering if more independents and even Democrats might start to agree with this, that they're tired of having to apologize for anything, especially when 2 U.S. soldiers were killed. This was not an intentional burning in any way. This was not something to try to inflame. This was an accident. It might have even been a mistaken communication. Soldiers who were just unable to actually read the language on the books that they were disposing of.
Well, but I think that you've seen in both Republican and Democratic administrations apologies on behalf of bad behavior by American soldiers. Perception is everything, and that is in international and domestic politics. And in this case, it is a perception issue about the United States. And so I think that, you know, the move was right. Who could have predicted the killing that would later happen? I think that Republicans are going to be hard-pressed to actually win on international politics in the coming debates, given all that's happened over the past year. I think Obama's got a very strong state, especially with Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State. We've had a very strong showing. So I think this will be an issue that will pass over quickly. And again, Gingrich blowing smoke, I don't think he will be the nominee, so I think it will be a non-issue.
Well, since you brought his name up again, I want to actually play that soundbite so everybody can see the tenor of how he brought this up. And David, I'm going to come to you right afterwards, but take a look at it. This is Newt Gingrich on the stump yesterday, essentially blasting President Obama for sending that apology, which was hand-delivered by our staff over there, the embassy staff, to the president of Afghanistan. Have a look.
President Obama surrendered twice today, and I think it deserves to be brought to the country's attention. There seems to be nothing that radical Islamists can do to get Barack Obama's attention in a negative way, and he is consistently apologizing to people who do not deserve the apology of the President of the United States, period.
So, David Drucker, on its face, I could see a lot of people getting pretty revved up about that, agreeing with Newt Gingrich, but what Marjorie just said also rings true, and you have to have a bit more of a memory to appreciate the list. I'm going to just go over a few things that President Obama's been able to do during his term. He wiped out Osama bin Laden. He got rid of Anwar al-Awlaki in Yemen. He played a huge role in the ouster of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. And then on the far right of your screen, you can see Hosni Mubarak of Egypt. Of course, we didn't have any military incursion there, but there was a strong diplomatic pressure put on that Egyptian president to step down, and of course that's exactly what happened. So, David, are Newt Gingrich's comments fair, or are they sort of in a vacuum?
Well, I don't think there's anything necessarily unfair with them. I think the question is, are people going to agree with him on a large scale in a general election? And I think that depends on whether or not the American people end up souring on President Obama's foreign policy leadership. For now, they appear quite happy. You look at all of the polls, the president's much weaker on domestic issues, and he gets rated quite positively on foreign policy and national defense issues.
So why would Newt do it? If he's getting good ratings on foreign policy, and that list I just showed you is just a small one.
Because Newt right now is running for the Republican nomination, and Republicans are rather unhappy with the president's leadership on this front, and it's the kind of thing that is going to be... Yes, Republicans. They're not happy. That's why you saw in your debate this week the president get blasted by all four candidates. It was one of the, well, I'd say 3 out of 4, not Ron Paul. It's one of the areas where the main competitors actually tend to always agree. They all agree that President Obama's leadership on foreign policy and national defense has been troublesome. Now, the world is volatile. Things could change, and if they do, this could be a sort of death by 1,000 cuts issue that could be brought up again. But for now, it's a one-day story. Nobody's going to care. Not about the event, but about the apology in the letter. Yeah, I certainly have heard a lot from Ron Paul in the debates and on the stump about bringing all troops home no matter what we leave behind. But I've always been curious as to how you can get past that graphic that I just put up there with all of those successes and think that foreign policy hasn't had some success over the last couple of years. But you are right. It is a Republican primary. All right, Matt and Marjorie and David, stick around because we're going to talk to you in the next hour as well. And we also want to remind our viewers not to miss.
Absolutely. All right, let's switch gears here and talk politics. A new poll is showing Rick Santorum is gaining more support from Republican women. Critics said some of his conservative views on abortion, birth control, and women in combat would actually hurt him at the polls.
Not so.
And you know, in 2008, women cast nearly 8 million more votes than men did. So this is a real hot-button issue here, and we've got lots of folks to talk about it this morning. Republican strategist Matt Mackowiak, Democratic strategist Marjorie Clifton, and political reporter for Roll Call, David Drucker. Thanks for being with us, Matt. I'm going to begin with you. We're going to put up a poll here. It's a Washington Post ABC News poll, and it shows that 57% of women view Santorum favorably. That's actually up 13 points since January, very close to Romney. But recent polling shows Romney with an edge in women in Arizona. We'd previously talked about Santorum perhaps having a woman problem. What should we read into this?
Well, I think Santorum gives you something to be for, and I think that's something that people are starting to see. You know, he's not as well known as Romney is. He's been towards the lesser-known candidates throughout this race until very recently. You know, a lot of times when you talk about these reproductive health issues, the views are brought up from the pro-choice perspective. They're not always brought up from the pro-life perspective. There are many pro-life women across the country, and they see someone like Senator Santorum, who's a real champion for pro-life causes, and they want to be for him. So he's someone that has a very attractive, large family. He's a strong Christian, strong Catholic. And he's someone who has real conviction and real courage, and he's demonstrated that on the campaign trail in a way that people are starting to see over the last few months.
Marjorie, I want you to weigh in on this, being a woman and the only woman on this panel, but you're also a Democrat. So let's talk about some of these things. You know, he's been called closed-minded. Some of his comments have been controversial. Women in the military, women in the workforce. We just talked about birth control. Does it surprise you that his numbers in women in the support of the GOP, or women in particular, Republican women, does that surprise you?
Well, I think the bump has everything to do with what Matt just mentioned, is this sort of new notoriety that Santorum has had recently. But I think it actually has more to do with the economy, in that Romney is still seen as that outsider elitist type, and that Santorum is getting more traction, is seen by the middle class and more down to earth, more in touch with what women are dealing with, which is the same economic hurt that the rest of the country is dealing with. But if you look historically, now, women were actually 51% of the population, and the big surge in women voting in the last cycle actually had a lot to do with Hillary Clinton being part of the race, and then that enthusiasm transferred over to Obama. And McCain actually only polled about 43% of women. In 2004, Bush had about 47% of women. So in general, women skew more towards the Democratic candidate for reasons, social reasons, such as contraception, abortion. And I think these recent debates about birth control in particular, and a lot of Santorum's comments, haven't caught up with them yet. So I think when the social issues catch up, which they're going to, and that's already started, as we saw in the Arizona debate.
That's kind of his platform, right? So, you know,
it is. Yeah.
You got to think that it's weighing in.
So I don't believe that this is going to hold for women. I can't believe that. I think it has more to do with the economy right now. And again, as the economy is improving, I think that will change as the social issues come to the forefront.
All right, David, I'm going to switch gears here, and I'm going to look way, way, way ahead. I want to talk about Marco Rubio, the Republican senator from Florida. He is of Cuban descent, we know, but there are new details right now out about his faith journey. He was baptized into the Catholic faith as a baby, then baptized into the Mormon Church at the age of 8, then back to Catholicism 4 years later. He attends Catholic and Baptist churches. His name is often floated around as a vice presidential candidate. Good, bad, doesn't matter.
You know, I've been thinking about this overnight, and I really don't think it matters at the end of the day. I think maybe if we would have found out that he was secretly a practicing member of a religion and he was lying about it, that could have been a problem. If he would have changed religions last week as an adult, maybe that would have been a problem. But a lot of people, especially when they're young in America, generally go through a sort of faith journey, and I think it's something a lot of Americans can identify with. And I'll say this, it was a great article in BuzzFeed that talked about this, but my takeaway from the article was a relative of Marco Rubio saying he's into religion. Religion and football, those are his things. Guess what? Most American voters are into religion and football, particularly in the South and the Midwest. I really don't think this is a problem.
All right, Matt, Marjorie, David, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks a lot.
Although you do wonder if most people have just one team in football that they like, as opposed to a few. Right?
I think, you know, a lot of people do a lot of soul searching and can identify with that.
No, I hear you. I'm always a fan of somebody who at least believes in something.